Principle number 8, Pan-African art of war, betrayal. This is important, brothers and sisters, because when we study our great leaders, the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey, Malcolm X, when we study Patrice Lumumba, Steve Biko, Julius Nyerere, Nnamdi Azikiwe, all the great Pan-Africanists, and those who were not Pan-Africanists, we find that there was always someone in the ranks who could be used by the enemy against the interests of their own people. Principle number 8 in the Pan-African art of war, the principle of betrayal, says that you must know your allies. You must know your allies within your race, and you must know who within your organization is most likely to betray you. For those of us who know the story of Jesus and Judas of the Bible, whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant, but the allegory, the message is very important. Jesus Christ knew exactly who would betray him. He knew Judas would betray him, but allowed Judas to stay within his organization of disciples, which allowed Judas the opportunity to serve the black man Jesus up to the white man, Pilate, so that he could be executed. The Jesus-Judas story is very, very instructional and significant for us. Whether it existed or not does not matter, because in African culture, many stories and messages are handed down to the people through fable. Because through fable, imaginary story, you can sometimes more powerfully, directly, and accurately convey your message. So I could care less whether the Jesus-Judas story is accurate historically. It is accurate politically, and so we must use it. Again, Jesus allowed his enemy, who he knew before time, Judas Iscariot, he allowed him to stay within his organization, which ultimately allowed him to be executed by the enemy, the European conqueror. Whether you believe he had to do it to perfect God's will or not is not something I care to discuss in this political audiobook. But as a political example, what that says, in keeping with the principle of betrayal, the 7th principle in the Pan-African art of war, is once you know you have a defector, once you know that there are individuals within the organization who are not there sincerely, but are only there to help your enemies, be your enemy be white or black skin white outside of the organization, get rid of them. Do not allow your enemy to plant the seeds of distrust, discontent, and destruction in your organization, because ultimately that Judas will bring about your downfall. Marcus Garvey knew he had FBI agents within his fold. Malcolm knew he had FBI agents within his fold. Lumumba had the inclination that he had enemies within his fold, but he allowed those enemies to stay. We have to stop that. We are not invincible. Only God Almighty is invincible. The 7th principle of betrayal says that you must, from the very beginning of the organization of your movement, privately, silently, and to yourself, as leader or chief organizer, you must create a list of those in that organization who appear to be most inclined to betray you. Once you are certain that they are betrayers, they must be removed. But not before you are certain. Because if you are wrong, you may be deflecting someone who was more sincere than anyone else around you. But because your intuition was misguided, you made a wrong decision and got rid of an ally who now becomes an enemy because he was deflected and he or she was truly sincere. So we must be careful in our investigations of who is or is not a true enemy. But once we know whether they are or are not true enemies, we get rid of them if they are true enemies. We must also be conscious of those who appear to be most likely to betray us. Why? So we can keep information away from them, So when the moment of betrayal arises and they see the opportunity to destroy the organization, they can be deflected quickly, instantaneously, and we do not have to worry about them giving valuable information to enemy organizations or enemy races, because they were never trusted with much in the beginning. When I look back on the history of the international movement for the independence and protection of African people that I founded September 21st, 2001, Pop Rob's Grab Bag in North Philadelphia, the mistake I made, two political mistakes that I will learn from when we reorganize, when I get back to the States in a few short days, God willing. Number one, I will not make the mistake of allowing my enemies, who I know for certain to be enemies, stay within my fold. Once you're certain, get rid of them. I was certain and I allowed them to stay. That was a mistake. Number two, I made the mistake of not caring who would betray me. Sometimes as black organizers, and I consider myself an organizer, not a leader. I don't need to tell you what to do. You know what to do. I have to organize you to do it. Sometimes we get inoculated with an invincibility complex. Invincibility complex that says I can't be harmed because I've been blessed to be able to organize my people the way that I have. We must always remember that the only force in the world that is invincible is the supreme deity. We are humans and we can be killed at any second. So we must get rid of that invincibility complex that has destroyed so many of us in the past because we failed to plan for our own security and protection. Get rid of the invincibility complex and start looking realistically from the moment you bring people in who is most likely to betray you. You can never keep agents and spies out of your organization. You can never keep them outside of the organization. So you must be vigilant for trying to discover who they are, to minimize damage and impact to the program. You can't eliminate spies. They will always be. But you can attempt to minimize damage and impact that they have by knowing who they are beforehand, being certain that they are what they appear to be, and then deflecting them. Again, those are mistakes that Brother Umar made 3 years ago, and I hope not to duplicate it, God willing, this time around. Now, some of you are saying that principle number 8 of betrayal is in conflict with principles articulated by Sun Tzu. I would argue they are not. Sun Tzu says when you have a double agent, sometimes they are good to have because they can be used by you and by your enemy. And you can feed that double agent wrong information. I agree with Sun Tzu. If you have a true double agent who is working for organized enemies such as the United States government, I believe that you may want to keep them and not deflect them, because you can feed them misinformation that it can take back to your political enemies that can buy you some time towards achieving your goals. I do not have a problem with that. But most of the enemies that are in our organizations are little petty Negro enemies who are not double agents. They join because they hate us and they want to do nothing but destroy us. So they can't be used against the enemy because they will never help you at all. So if you have petty little Negro enemies who are only infiltrating your group so they can take from you and give to your enemy, and never take from your enemy and give to you, they are of no benefit to you as a resource whatsoever. So these are the enemies who need to be taken away from the group. If you have a double agent who you consider to be valuable, keep them. I don't have a problem with that. I agree with Sun Tzu. But most of the people who infiltrate us have an emotional loyalty to the group they are helping and have an emotional hostility towards us. When I look at the enemies who infiltrated the IMI-PAP, they were not loyal to me at all. So for me to have kept them around as long as I did, which was a mistake, allowed them to try to harm the foundation of what I was building. They were not double agents. They were single agents being used against Umar in the IMI-PAP, never to be used by Umar in the IMI-PAP. So please be clear. If you have a high-ranking government double agent, I would say keep them around. But if you have a low-ranking petty Negro agent who is only being sent to you from some poorly organized Negro group, get rid of them.